Please be advised, this story delves into themes of psychological distress, memory manipulation, and existential dread. Listener discretion is advised. It started, as most nightmares do, on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. Sarah was in her backyard, the one with the overgrown hydrangeas and the chipped ceramic bird bath, trying to untangle a particularly stubborn string of fairy lights. The kind of mundane task that usually fills your head with quiet thoughts about dinner plans or overdue library books. But then a flicker of movement caught her eye. A robin, startled by her clumsy efforts, burst from the thicket and shot upwards. Sarah's gaze, without conscious thought, followed it. Higher and higher, past the gabled roof of her neighbor's house, past the peak of the old oak tree, past the usual line where the world stopped being green and gray and began to be something else. Only this time there was no something else. There was nothing. It wasn't just a cloudy day. It wasn't a low-hanging fog, or a persistent drizzle. It was a profound, unsettling absence, where the vast, boundless expanse of blue or gray or even star-dusted black should have been. There was only a ceiling. A uniform, featureless, impossibly dull expanse that seemed to stretch from horizon to horizon, pressing down on the town like an inverted bowl. It wasn't dark exactly. It was just flat, lifeless, like the inside of a forgotten concrete bunker, but on an unimaginable scale. Sarah blinked. She shook her head, a sudden sharp ache blooming behind her eyes. This was impossible. She must be tired, hallucinating. She squinted, rubbed her temples, and looked again. Still there. The same oppressive, colorless dome. It wasn't reflecting anything. It wasn't emitting light. It was just there. A colossal, unyielding barrier. A cold dread began to seep into her bones, chilling her from the inside out. She knew with an absolute certainty that rattled her to her core that this was wrong, deeply fundamentally wrong, because she remembered. She remembered blue. She remembered clouds like cotton candy, bruised purple storms, and the blinding brilliance of the sun. She remembered the moon, a pearl in the velvet night, and the countless pinpricks of distant stars. She remembered the sky. But what she was seeing now, this wasn't the sky. This was a lid. Her hands, still clutching the tangled fairy lights, began to tremble. Her breath caught in her throat. How long had it been like this? How could she have never noticed? She cast her gaze around her small backyard, at the familiar houses of Oakhaven, the neat fences, the perfectly manicured lawns. Everything seemed normal. Too normal. The quiet hum of the neighborhood was undisturbed. A lawnmower droned 2 streets over. A child's laughter drifted from somewhere down Elm Street. No one was screaming. No one was pointing. No one was looking up. She stumbled inside, the fairy lights falling forgotten to the ground. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. She rushed to the living room window, pulling back the heavy curtains. The same featureless expanse stretched above the rooftops. She ran to the guest bedroom, flung open the blinds. Identical. She looked out her kitchen window, over the sink, past the rose bushes. The same unyielding, indifferent ceiling. This wasn't a trick of light. This wasn't a temporary atmospheric phenomenon. This was a permanent fixture. And she was the only one who seemed to see it. Oakhaven, a town nestled deep in the valley, surrounded by ancient, towering pines and the gentle curve of the Willow Creek. It was the kind of place people moved to escape the chaos of the city, to raise their kids in peace, to live a life untouched by the world's harsher edges. It was idyllic, picturesque, almost aggressively quaint. Brick houses with white trim, porch swings, flagpoles flying the stars and stripes. A town where everyone knew everyone, and secrets were few and far between. A town that had always felt a little stifling to Sarah, with its unspoken rules and its fierce resistance to change. But never before had it felt like a cage. She tried to calm herself. Maybe she was misremembering. Maybe the sky had always been like this. That thought was even more terrifying. Had her memory been altered? Was this some kind of slow, insidious onset of delusion? She grabbed her phone, her fingers fumbling with the screen. She needed to see it. Proof. She typed sky pictures into the search bar. Images flooded her screen. Brilliant azure, wispy cirrus, dramatic sunsets, swirling galaxies. Each one a visceral punch to her gut. This was what she remembered. This was what was missing. This was what the people of Oakhaven seemed perfectly content to live without. She scrolled through social media, searching for any mention. Nothing. Not a single post from Oakhaven residents complaining about the lack of blue, the absence of clouds, the strange, oppressive lid above their heads. They posted pictures of their kids playing in parks, their barbecues, their perfectly baked pies. All under that same colorless expanse, which they seemed utterly oblivious to. It was just background, unremarkable, like the air they breathed. A desperate need to confirm, to share this horrifying realization, seized her. She had to talk to someone, anyone. Her next-door neighbor, Michael, was watering his petunias. Michael, with his perpetually cheerful demeanor and his immaculate lawn. He was the most grounded, most sensible person she knew. If anyone would understand, it would be Michael. Sarah practically sprinted across her lawn, her heart still pounding. Michael, can I ask you something? Something really important. He straightened up, a warm smile on his face. Sarah, everything all right? You look a little flushed. No, everything's not all right, she stammered, trying to catch her breath. Michael, look up. Just look up. He chuckled, a soft, reassuring sound. Look up at what, dear? Is there a new bird in the oak tree? You know how much I love the cardinals. He glanced up casually, his eyes sweeping across the dull expanse above them. His brow furrowed for a fleeting second, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. Then it was gone. He looked back at her, his smile unwavering. It's a perfectly lovely day, isn't it? A bit muted perhaps, but calm. Good for the petunias. Sarah stared at him, her mouth agape. Muted? Michael, where's the sky? Where are the clouds? The sun? The blue? His smile faltered slightly, replaced by a gentle, almost pitying expression. The sky? Well, it's right there, Sarah. Always has been. What are you talking about? Are you feeling quite all right? Perhaps you've been working too hard in the garden. He reached out, a kind paternal gesture, to touch her arm. She recoiled, a shiver running through her. No, Michael. Don't you see it? It's gone. It's replaced. This isn't normal. He sighed, his gaze softening further. Sarah, you're usually so grounded. Are you sure you're not just a little stressed? Maybe take a nap. Or a nice cup of chamomile tea. He turned back to his petunias, his posture conveying a quiet dismissal. He wasn't being dismissive out of malice, but out of a genuine, profound lack of understanding. It was as if she were speaking a foreign language. The conversation had gone exactly as she had feared. He didn't see it. Or worse, he couldn't see it. A new wave of terror washed over her. It wasn't just her. It was them. All of them. They were blind. Or deliberately ignorant. She walked away from Michael's perfectly green lawn, her steps heavy, her mind racing. Oakhaven, the town that forgot the sky. Or perhaps the town that never knew it. She started to notice things. The way the streets were subtly curved, never offering a long, clear view upwards. The way the buildings, while not skyscraper tall, always seemed to lean slightly inward, creating a perpetual sense of enclosure. The abundant, dense tree cover that provided shade, yes, but also acted as a natural canopy, further obscuring any potential upward gaze. Even the streetlights, she realized, were angled downwards, bathing the ground in a soft glow, but never casting light towards the ceiling. Was this by design? Was Oakhaven built to keep its inhabitants from ever looking up? And if so, why? Who would do such a thing? The thought was chilling. It meant this wasn't just a natural phenomenon, or a shared delusion. It was orchestrated. That night, sleep was impossible. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret. Every creak of the old house sounded like a warning. She lay awake, staring at her bedroom ceiling, which suddenly felt far too close, far too solid. The dull, oppressive expanse outside pressed in on her, a constant, silent threat. She was alone in this, alone with a truth no one else seemed to perceive. The very fabric of her reality had unraveled, and no one else even noticed the threads were gone. But despite the terror, a strange, defiant spark ignited within her. She couldn't unsee it. She couldn't forget. And she wouldn't let this lie. She would find out what happened to the sky. She would find out who was responsible. And she would make them see. She would find out what happened to the sky. She would find out who was responsible. And she would make them see. The words echoed in Emily's mind, a fierce, defiant mantra against the suffocating reality that had descended upon her. She lay in her bed, the gray light filtering through her window from the seamless dome above. a constant reminder of the impossible truth. Her heart still pounded, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs, but the initial paralyzing terror had begun to recede, replaced by a cold, burning resolve. She had to be careful. More than careful. She had to be invisible. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, the familiar carpet feeling alien beneath her bare feet. Every object in her room, every photograph, every book, seemed to mock her with its normalcy. How could everything else be the same, yet the fundamental canopy of their existence be a lie? Her reflection in the bathroom mirror stared back, wild-eyed and pale. Emily splashed cold water on her face, trying to wash away the nightmare, but the reflection remained, a stark image of a woman who had seen too much. She forced herself to breathe slow and deep. Panic wouldn't help. Rationality, however skewed by her discovery, was her only weapon. She had to test it. She had to know if she was truly alone in this knowledge. Dressing in her usual jeans and a comfortable sweater, Emily tried to project an air of normalcy as she walked into the kitchen. Her mother, Susan, was humming softly, preparing breakfast. The smell of frying bacon and coffee filled the air, a comforting scent that now felt like a cruel deception. "Morning, sweetie," Susan said, turning with a warm smile. "Sleep well." Emily swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "Yeah, Mom. Just a little restless." She forced a smile. "Anything interesting happened last night?" Susan chuckled, flipping a pancake. "Interesting? In Miller's Creek? You know better than that, Em. Just old Mr. Henderson complaining about his prize-winning tomatoes again." Emily's gaze drifted to the kitchen window, where the uniform gray light poured in. "It's such a consistent sort of day, isn't it?" she ventured, trying to keep her tone casual. "Always this, even light. Never really sunny, never really dark. Just this." Susan glanced out the window, then shrugged. "That's just Miller's Creek, honey. Always a bit overcast. Good for the crops, though. Keeps things from getting too dry." She paused, then added, "You're sounding a bit philosophical this morning, Em. Everything all right?" Emily's heart sank. Her mother saw nothing. She simply accepted the unchanging gray as a characteristic of their small town. No memory of brilliant blue, of fluffy white clouds, of the blinding sun or the ancient glittering tapestry of stars. Nothing. "Just thinking," Emily mumbled, picking at her breakfast. She couldn't push it further, not yet. Not with her mother. After breakfast, Emily decided to take a walk through town. Miller's Creek was small, quaint, nestled in a valley that now felt less like a natural embrace and more like a carefully constructed prison. The main street was lined with familiar shops. Miller's General Store, Oak Haven Books, the Daily Grind coffee shop. People milled about, chatting, laughing, living their lives under the immense fraudulent ceiling. Did they not see it? Or had they simply forgotten? She saw Michael, a high school friend, outside the hardware store, loading sacks of soil into his truck. Michael had always been practical, grounded. If anyone would notice something so fundamentally wrong, it would be him. "Hey, Mikey," Emily called out, trying to sound cheerful. Michael grinned, waving. "Aing, long time no see. How's life treating you?" "It's something," Emily replied, walking closer. She gestured vaguely upwards. "It's another one of those days, huh? You ever wish we'd get a really clear day? You know, where you can just see everything." Michael paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "Clear day? What do you mean, Em? It's pretty clear right now. No fog, no rain." He looked up, his eyes scanning the featureless gray expanse, then back at her with a puzzled frown. "Looks normal to me." "No, I mean," Emily pressed, her voice a little too eager. "Like really clear. Where you can see the blue beyond the gray. And at night, the stars. Remember those nights we used to spend out by the old lake, just looking up?" Michael's brow furrowed deeper, a look of genuine confusion spreading across his face. "Stars? Emily, are you feeling all right? We don't have stars here. Never have. It's always been like this. Miller's Creek, it's just always a little muted. Good for the crops, like your mom always says." He chuckled, a sound that grated on Emily's nerves. "Maybe you're thinking of a documentary or something." A cold dread began to coil in Emily's stomach. It wasn't just that they didn't remember. It was that the concept seemed utterly alien to them, like she was speaking a foreign language. Michael, her down-to-earth friend, looked at her as if she'd lost her mind. "Yeah, maybe," Emily said, forcing a laugh that felt brittle and fake. "Must be tired. Anyway, good seeing you, Mikey. She quickly made her excuses and walked away, her mind reeling. This was worse than she thought. It wasn't just a collective amnesia. It was a collective reality that excluded the sky. Their memories had been rewritten or perhaps never even formed. They had simply adapted to the world as it was presented to them, never questioning the absence of something they had never known. Emily found herself at the daily grind, needing a moment to collect her thoughts, and perhaps to try one more time. She ordered a coffee and sat at a small table by the window, watching the muted world outside. The girl behind the counter, Sarah, a cheerful redhead who'd been in her class, brought her order. "Thanks, Sarah," Emily said, taking a sip. "Slow day." "Pretty much," Sarah replied, leaning against the counter. "Same as always. You know Miller's Creek." Emily decided to try a different approach. "I was just thinking," she began, keeping her voice low, "about how contained everything feels here, like we're in our own little bubble." Sarah laughed. "Well, we are in a valley, Em. Always has been. Keeps us cozy, I guess." "Cozy, sure," Emily pushed. "But sometimes don't you ever just want to see beyond it? See what's out there? Like really out there? The wide open world with no ceiling." Sarah's smile faltered slightly. She looked at Emily with a flicker of concern, almost pity. "No ceiling? Emily, what are you talking about? We're in the open air. It doesn't get much more open than this. Look." She gestured out the window, pointing at the seamless gray. "See? Nothing but sky above us." Sky. The word tasted like ash in Emily's mouth when Sarah said it. It was a word emptied of its true meaning, a placeholder for the vast artificial dome. Sarah's eyes held no recognition of the difference, no hint of understanding, only a gentle, bewildered amusement. Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool air. It was a creeping, insidious realization that she was utterly, terrifyingly alone in her perception. Everyone else lived in a manufactured reality, and she was the only one who saw the wires, the seams, the lie. She finished her coffee quickly, the warmth doing nothing to thaw the ice forming in her veins. She couldn't talk to anyone. Not about this. They wouldn't understand. They would think she was delusional. Or worse, they might report her. To whom? The people who built this cage. Emily knew she couldn't rely on anyone else. Her investigation had to be solitary, and it had to be discreet. She needed to find an edge, a flaw, something that betrayed the true nature of their world. Her thoughts turned to the perimeter of Miller's Creek. The town was nestled in a small valley, surrounded by gentle, rolling hills that eventually gave way to dense forest. She remembered hiking those hills as a child, thinking they were the boundaries of her world. Now, she wondered if they were the literal boundaries of their prison. She decided to head for the old abandoned mill on the outskirts of town. It sat near the highest point of the valley's edge that was still accessible without drawing too much attention. The mill had been derelict for decades, its rusted machinery and crumbling walls a forgotten relic. It was the perfect place to go unnoticed. The walk was long, taking her away from the familiar houses and into the overgrown paths that skirted the forest. The air grew cooler and the faint, uniform light seemed to dim slightly as the trees grew denser. Emily felt a surge of nervous energy. This was it. This was where she could begin to scratch at the surface of the truth. As she pushed through a thicket of thorny bushes, the old mill came into view. Its skeletal remains stood stark against the gray backdrop, a silent sentinel. She carefully navigated the treacherous ground, littered with rusted metal and broken wood. The silence here was profound, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of unseen birds. Emily ascended a rickety, exterior staircase that clung precariously to the side of the mill, her heart hammering against her ribs. She needed to get as high as possible, to get a clearer view of the vast artificial ceiling that encased their lives. The wood groaned under her weight, each step a gamble. Finally, she reached the top floor, a gaping hole where the roof had once been. She stood on the edge, bracing herself against the wind that swept through the broken structure. From this vantage point, she could see the entire town spread out below, a miniature world under the immense, seamless gray dome. It curved perfectly, extending far beyond the visible horizon, a perfect, unbroken prison lid. But then she saw it. Near the very edge of the valley, where the dome appeared to meet the distant tree line, there was a faint shimmer. It wasn't visible from the town below, or even from the lower parts of the mill. But up here at this precise angle, with the muted light catching it just so, she saw a subtle distortion. A faint, almost imperceptible line, like a hairline fracture in glass, tracing a path along the curved surface. Emily squinted, her breath catching in her throat. It wasn't a crack but a seam, a meticulously crafted, almost invisible seam where two massive panels of the sky met. And near that seam, barely visible to the naked eye, was something else. A small, perfectly circular indentation. It wasn't natural. It was too precise, too uniform. She leaned forward, straining to see more clearly. The indentation was no bigger than a dinner plate, and it seemed to pulse with a faint, steady hum that she could only just perceive, a low thrumming vibration that resonated through the very air. It was a technological signature, undeniable and chilling. This wasn't just a projection, it was a physical structure, a colossal, engineered construct. And that small humming circle? It looked like a vent, or perhaps an access port. A wave of nausea washed over Emily, but it was quickly overshadowed by a surge of pure, unadulterated terror. They weren't just living under a false sky. They were living inside a meticulously sealed environment. And if the sky was fake, if the very air was controlled, then what else was a lie? What else had been engineered? The plants? The animals? Even the people? The realization struck her with the force of a physical blow. Miller's Creek wasn't just a town that forgot the sky. It was a meticulously crafted, perfectly maintained terrarium. And she, Emily, was just another specimen in someone's elaborate, terrifying experiment. And someone somewhere was watching. The words echoed in Emily's mind, a chilling mantra of revelation. Terrarium, specimen, experiment, watching. The air, once merely crisp, now felt heavy, artificial. The perpetual blue, once comforting, now seemed a cruel, mocking canvas. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of her own terror. She felt a profound, sickening disconnect, as if the ground beneath her feet was no longer solid earth but a cleverly disguised stage. She stood there for what felt like an eternity, the chill wind of the canyon doing nothing to cool the feverish panic rising within her. Her breath hitched. This wasn't some abstract philosophical musing. This was a visceral, undeniable truth that had just slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. Her entire perception of reality had shattered. Miller's Creek wasn't a town. It was a cage. And she, Emily, was inside it. The immediate urge was to run, to scream, to tear at the invisible walls she now knew were there. But where would she run? Who would she scream to? The very people she might turn to were either complicit or, far more terrifyingly, just as trapped and unaware as she had been moments ago. A cold, hard logic began to assert itself through the haze of fear. Panic would achieve nothing. She needed proof. She needed to understand. Her eyes scanned the canyon walls again, but this time with a horrifying new lens. The sheer, impossible smoothness of the rock face, the way it seemed to curve inward at the very top, almost imperceptibly, creating that perfectly consistent skyline. It wasn't natural erosion. It was construction. Massive, impossible construction. And above it all, that unblemished, unchanging blue. It wasn't a sky. It was a ceiling. A colossal, perfectly engineered dome, stretching across the entire valley, mimicking the heavens with such precision that generations had lived and died beneath it, never once suspecting the deception. The thought made her stomach lurch. How could anyone build something so immense, so intricate, and keep it a secret? And more importantly, why? She had to get closer to the edge, to the walls of her prison. She began to move, not running wildly, but with a new, urgent purpose. Her steps were deliberate, each one a silent defiance against the unseen architects of her reality. She followed the winding path back towards the overlook she'd stumbled upon earlier, the one that had first given her that unsettling feeling. This time she wasn't just looking for a view. She was looking for a seam, a crack, any flaw in the magnificent deception. As she walked, her mind replayed every oddity, every subtle hint she had dismissed. The way the weather was always perfect, never too hot, never too cold, just consistently mild. The lack of natural predators in the surrounding wilderness, something she'd vaguely noted but never questioned. The pristine condition of everything, from the meticulously maintained roads to the vibrant, unchanging foliage. It wasn't just a well-kept town, it was a sterile environment. Even the air, she now realized, had an almost too clean, filtered quality to it. She reached the edge of the canyon again, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She leaned over the railing, staring down into the dizzying depths. The rock face below was just as she remembered, but now she saw the subtle, almost imperceptible sheen on its surface, a faint metallic glint that caught the filtered light in an unnatural way. It wasn't rock. It was a composite material designed to look like rock, but smooth, impenetrable. And it extended all the way up, curving seamlessly into the arching sky. She was trapped, utterly, undeniably trapped. A new wave of terror washed over her, colder and more profound than the first. It was the terror of absolute impotence. She was a fly in a jar, a fish in a bowl, and someone somewhere was watching. The thought made her skin crawl. Were they watching her now? Were they observing her realization, her panic, her desperate search for answers? Did they find it amusing? Or were they simply collecting data, dispassionately recording the reactions of their specimen? She pulled back from the railing, her hands clammy. She needed to think, to plan. But her mind was a whirlwind of horrifying possibilities. If this was an experiment, what was its purpose? What were they studying? And what would happen when the experiment concluded? She knew she couldn't show her hand. Not yet. If the townspeople were truly unaware, she couldn't risk alarming them. If they were complicit, she couldn't risk exposing her knowledge. She had to act normal, blend in while secretly searching for a way out, for answers. Her gaze drifted back to the town below, nestled in the valley. From this height, it looked like a perfect miniature, a toy village. The charming houses, the quaint main street, the bustling market square, all part of the elaborate facade. She wondered about the people she'd met. David, the friendly innkeeper. Sarah, the cheerful baker. Even Michael, with his quiet intensity. Were they all part of it? Or were they just as much prisoners as she was, living out their lives in an illusion, their memories perhaps even fabricated or altered? The idea of fabricated memories sent a shiver down her spine. If the entire environment was artificial, how much of her own past, her own journey to Miller's Creek, was real? Had she truly driven here? Or had she simply woken up, with a convenient backstory implanted in her mind? The thought was almost too much to bear. It threatened to unravel her very sense of self. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to ground herself. Asterisk focus, Emily. You're here now. This is real. The threat is real. Asterisk. She opened her eyes, resolute. She needed to return to town, to act as if nothing had changed. But now every interaction, every observation, would be filtered through this horrifying new lens. She would look for inconsistencies, for tells, for anything that might expose the true nature of Miller's Creek. As she descended the path, a new thought struck her, chilling her to the bone. The man in her dreams, the one in the trench coat, always watching from the periphery. Was he a memory? A premonition? Or was he a real person, one of the observers? Perhaps even a guard subtly monitoring the experiment from within? The image of his shadowed face, his unblinking stare, suddenly felt terrifyingly real, no longer just a figment of her subconscious. She reached the edge of town, her heart still pounding but her face composed. She walked towards the main street, forcing herself to maintain a steady pace. The familiar sounds of the town, laughter, distant music, the clatter of dishes now seemed alien, amplified, like sounds echoing in a vast, enclosed space. She passed the general store, its windows displaying an array of perfectly arranged goods. She caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass, a woman with wide, haunted eyes, trying desperately to project an air of normalcy. She quickly averted her gaze. As she neared the inn, she saw David, the innkeeper, chatting jovially with an older couple on the porch. He looked up, smiled, and waved. Emily forced a smile back, a brittle, fragile thing that felt alien on her face. David's smile was genuine, warm. Was he an unwitting participant? Or a brilliant actor? The uncertainty was agonizing. She went to her room, needing a moment of solitude, a place where she could drop the pretense. Her room, once a sanctuary, now felt like another part of the cage. She sank onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. The ceiling, not the sky. Her mind raced, trying to find a weak point, an escape. If there was a dome, there had to be an entrance, a control center, a way for the operators to maintain it. And if there was an experiment, there had to be a purpose, a timeline. She thought about the old library, the place she'd spent so much time researching the town's history. Was that history even real? Or was it meticulously crafted fiction, designed to give the inhabitants a sense of belonging? A shared past that never existed? The thought of all those books, all that knowledge being a lie was profoundly unsettling. She decided her next step had to be methodical. She needed to gather information discreetly. She couldn't ask direct questions. She couldn't show her suspicion. She had to observe, listen, and piece together the truth from the subtle discrepancies. The library. It was the only place in town that seemed to hold a vast repository of information, even if it was doctored. She needed to go back, but not just to read the history books. She needed to look at the books themselves, their bindings, their publication dates, their condition. She needed to look for anything that felt out of place, anything that hinted at a deeper hidden truth. And she needed to find out more about the outside. If the dome was real, what did the outside world look like? Was it still there? Was Miller's Creek a sanctuary from something catastrophic? Or was it simply a bizarre, contained environment, a human zoo, for the amusement or study of some unknown entity? The questions spiraled, each one more terrifying than the last. But amidst the fear, a cold fury began to burn within her. She was not just a specimen, she was Emily, and she would not be observed, experimented upon, and forgotten. She would fight. She got up from the bed, a new resolve hardening her features. She would start by observing the library, then the town's infrastructure. She would look for power sources, ventilation systems, anything that indicated the presence of advanced technology hidden beneath the rustic facade. She would become a ghost in her own prison, watching the watchers, seeking the truth. As she made her way back out into the deceptively peaceful streets, she noticed something she hadn't before. A subtle flicker in the light, high above, near the zenith of the sky. It was so faint, so fleeting, that she almost dismissed it as a trick of her anxious mind. But then it happened again. A tiny, almost imperceptible ripple, like light passing through disturbed water, across the perfect blue. It wasn't a natural sky. It was a screen. And for a split second, she had seen the projector bulb stutter. Her heart leaped into her throat. This was it. This was the proof. Miller's Creek wasn't just a town that forgot the sky. It was a meticulously crafted, perfectly maintained terrarium. And she, Emily, was just another specimen in someone's elaborate, terrifying experiment. And someone somewhere was watching. And now she realized someone was just about to make a very big mistake. The blood in Emily's veins turned to ice, then immediately ignited with a furious, defiant heat. A mistake? Yes. Their mistake wasn't in creating this elaborate cage, or in planting her within it. Their mistake was in letting her find the crack in the facade. Their unforgivable error was in underestimating her. They had given her a mind that questioned, a spirit that refused to be contained. And now she would use every ounce of it against them. She pulled her hand back from the window, the phantom chill of the glass still clinging to her fingertips. The realization had been a slow, creeping poison, but now it was a roaring fire. Every oddity, every unsettling detail that had gnawed at her subconscious suddenly clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The unchanging, muted light, the lack of weather, the uncanny perfection of the town's maintenance, the way the residents seemed to exist within predictable loops, their conversations often feeling rehearsed. Emily took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing herself to be calm. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. She was no longer just Emily, the new arrival to Oakhaven, trying to make sense of a strange town. She was a prisoner, an unwitting participant in a twisted reality show, and her captors were everywhere unseen. Her first instinct was to run, to scream, to shatter the illusion. But where would she run? To the forest that was a wall? To the townspeople who were either complicit or equally trapped? No, she needed to be smart. She needed to observe, to analyze, to find the true exit, not just a painted backdrop. She spent the next few hours in a heightened state of awareness, moving through her small house, touching objects, peering into corners. The furniture, the appliances, the books on the shelf, all seemed perfectly normal, indistinguishable from anything in the outside world she remembered. But now she saw them as props, carefully selected, strategically placed. Was there a hidden camera behind the antique clock? A microphone disguised as a smoke detector? Every shadow seemed to conceal an eye, every creak of the floorboards a judgment. She tried to remember the moment she arrived in Oakhaven. It was hazy, disorienting. A long drive, a sudden exhaustion, then waking up in the guest room of the town's only bed and breakfast, greeted by the perpetually cheerful Martha. She had attributed the fuzziness to stress and the unfamiliar surroundings. Now she wondered if it was something more sinister. A sedative? A memory wipe? The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through her. They hadn't just built a town, they had built her memories of arriving in it. Emily knew she couldn't stay cooped up. She needed to go out to see the terrarium with her new eyes. But she also knew she couldn't act suspicious. She had to maintain the illusion that she was still the naive newcomer, still blissfully unaware. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that wouldn't draw attention. As she stepped out onto her porch, the familiar soft twilight glow seemed aggressive, mocking. The air, usually so still, now felt heavy, artificial. She forced a small, polite smile at Mrs. Henderson, who was tending her immaculate rose bushes across the street, just as she did every afternoon. Mrs. Henderson returned the smile, her eyes sparkling with that same unsettling, almost vacant pleasantness. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. Was Mrs. Henderson an actor? Or another prisoner, so deeply conditioned she no longer saw the bars? Emily decided her first target would be the town's supposed edge, the dense forest that encircled Oakhaven. She had tried to venture deep into it before, only to be met with an impassable thicket and a strange, almost imperceptible sense of dread that turned her back. This time she wouldn't be deterred by a feeling. She would be looking for proof. She walked casually towards the outskirts, past the town square where Michael always seemed to be, perpetually polishing the same bench or sweeping stray leaves. Today, he was meticulously trimming the hedges around the fountain. He looked up as she passed, offering his usual warm, easy smile. "Lovely day, isn't it, Emily?" Emily's heart pounded. Was he part of it? His kindness, his unwavering geniality, was it a performance? Or was he another victim, perhaps even a key to understanding what was happening? She forced her own smile. "It certainly is, Michael. Just taking a walk." "Enjoy," he said, and went back to his trimming, his movements precise, almost mechanical. The further she walked from the town center, the quieter it became. The houses thinned out, replaced by larger plots of land, then eventually the looming wall of trees. The air grew cooler here, and the light seemed to dim even further, as if the artificial sun struggled to penetrate the dense canopy. Emily pushed her way into the woods, ignoring the familiar resistance, the feeling of something pushing back. She focused on the ground, on the trees, on anything that seemed out of place. The earth beneath her feet was soft, undisturbed, covered in a thick carpet of moss and fallen leaves. The trees were tall, ancient-looking oaks, their branches interwoven, forming a dark, forbidding ceiling. But as she went deeper, she noticed something. The trees, while appearing natural, seemed to grow in an almost too uniform pattern. There was a rhythm to their placement, a subtle, almost imperceptible grid. And the leaves, they were always green, always full. No signs of seasonal change, no yellowing, no falling en masse. Just perpetual, unchanging foliage. She stopped at a particularly dense section, near where she had turned back before. The undergrowth here was incredibly thick, almost like a solid wall of thorny bushes and intertwined vines. Felt impenetrable. But this time she didn't just see a natural barrier. She saw a design. She began to push, to feel, to examine with a desperate intensity. Her fingers brushed against bark that felt too smooth, too perfect in places. She ran her hand along a thick vine, and felt a subtle, almost imperceptible vibration. A hum. It was so faint she almost dismissed it as her imagination, a product of her heightened paranoia. But she pressed her ear closer to the vine, then to the trunk of a nearby tree. There it was. A low, continuous thrum, barely audible, like a distant generator or a massive hidden machine. It wasn't natural. It was mechanical. Her breath hitched. She began to claw at the vines, ignoring the scratches on her hands, the thorns tearing at her sleeves. She pulled away moss that clung to a large oak trunk, revealing not solid wood, but a faint, almost invisible seam. It was incredibly well hidden, blending perfectly with the surrounding bark. But it was there. A thin hairline crack that ran vertically up the tree. With trembling fingers, Emily traced the seam. It was cold to the touch, not like organic matter. Felt like metal, or a composite material designed to perfectly mimic wood. She pressed harder, pushing against the surface. It didn't budge, but the hum grew slightly louder, a subtle change in pitch, as if her touch had triggered something. Panic and exhilaration surged through her in equal measure. She had found it. The wall. The edge of their fabricated world. It wasn't a forest, it was a meticulously constructed facade. A giant circular screen designed to keep them in and the truth out. The trees, the undergrowth, even the soil itself, all part of the elaborate set. And the sky, the eternal twilight, it was just a massive, sophisticated projection. She leaned her forehead against the cool, artificial bark, her eyes scanning the impossibly green leaves above. This wasn't just a town. It was a massive enclosed dome, a biosphere, a terrarium. And if this was a terrarium, then there had to be an outside. A place where the real sky was, where the sun rose and set, where seasons changed. And there had to be an operator. Someone pulling the strings, observing their every move. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the hum of the hidden machinery. She was so close, so incredibly, terrifyingly close to understanding. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind her. Emily froze, every muscle tensing. The hum of the wall seemed to amplify in her ears. She hadn't heard anyone approach. The woods had been silent, save for the faint, artificial thrum. Slowly, carefully, she turned her head. Standing just a few feet away, partially obscured by the perpetual twilight and the dense foliage, was a figure. Tall, slender, dressed in dark clothing. Its face was shrouded in shadow, but Emily could feel its gaze, cold and unwavering, fixed directly on her. It wasn't Michael. It wasn't Mrs. Henderson. It wasn't anyone she knew from Oakhaven. A wave of pure, primal fear washed over her, far more potent than the intellectual dread of being trapped. This was different. This was immediate. This was them. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It simply stood there, a silent, menacing sentinel. But its presence was a clear, unambiguous message. You've gone too far, Emily. She felt a cold dread seep into her bones. They had been watching, all along. Her every step, her every doubt, her every desperate search. They had allowed her to discover the seam, to touch the artificial wall, perhaps even to hear the hum. But now she had crossed a line. And the silent figure in the woods was there to remind her of it. Her mind raced, searching for an escape, a plan. But her body refused to obey, rooted to the spot by sheer terror. She looked from the figure to the artificial tree, then back again. There was no escape. Not here. Not now. The figure took a single, slow step forward. The sound of its footfall was muffled by the mossy ground, but to Emily, it echoed like a thunderclap. The shadows seemed to deepen around it, making it even more indistinct, more threatening. She couldn't stay. She had made her discovery, and now she was exposed. She had to get back, to process this, to plan her next move. But how? With them watching. As the figure took another step, Emily's fight-or-flight response finally kicked in. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She turned and ran, not back towards the town, but deeper into the seemingly impenetrable thickness of the simulated forest, desperately hoping to find another anomaly, another weakness, anything that could lead her to the truth, or at least to a brief moment of freedom from the terrifying gaze of her unseen captors. She ran, knowing that with every frantic stride, she was plunging deeper into their carefully constructed illusion, and further into their deadly game. And she knew with a chilling certainty that the game had just become very, very real. She ran, knowing that with every frantic stride, she was plunging deeper into their carefully constructed illusion, and further into their deadly game. And she knew with a chilling certainty that the game had just become very, very real. The gravel crunched under her desperate feet, each sound amplified in the suffocating silence of the Oakhaven night. Behind her, she imagined the soft, methodical footsteps of her pursuers, the ones who had watched her, studied her, and now hunted her. Her lungs burned, a raw ache spreading through her chest, but she pushed harder, her mind a frantic kaleidoscope of fear and a burgeoning, terrifying understanding. She darted between the quaint, identical houses, their windows dark and uninviting, offering no solace. The perfect symmetry of the streets, once charming, now felt like a prison grid. Every corner she turned seemed to lead to another identical lane, another row of manicured lawns and silent porches. The town wasn't just a place, it was a repeating pattern, an infinite loop designed to confuse and trap. A flicker of light in the distance, a faint glow from what looked like the town square, pulled her in that direction. Perhaps there was an exit, a break in the uniform facade. She cut through a narrow alleyway, the air suddenly thick with the smell of damp earth and something metallic, unfamiliar in this otherwise pristine environment. Her hand brushed against a wall that felt rough, unpainted, utterly unlike the smooth pastel surfaces of the houses. She paused, her breath catching in her throat, and ran her fingers over the coarse texture. It was like concrete, unfinished, hidden behind the illusion. She pressed on, the alley opening into a less maintained section of Oakhaven. Here the streetlights were dimmer, casting long, distorted shadows. The houses were still neat, but a subtle shabbiness crept in: a loose shutter, a patch of overgrown weeds, a paint chip on a porch swing. It was as if the illusion thinned out the further she ventured from the town's core. Suddenly a sound. Not footsteps, but a low rhythmic hum like machinery. It pulsed through the ground, vibrating up her legs. She froze, heart hammering against her ribs, and strained her ears. The hum was coming from a large, windowless building at the end of the alley, a structure she hadn't noticed before, its dark facade blending seamlessly into the inky night. It looked less like a house and more like an industrial shed, out of place in Oakhaven's idyllic tableau. Driven by a desperate curiosity, a need to understand, she crept towards it. The hum grew louder, a deep thrumming that resonated with something primal in her fear. The building had a single heavy steel door, devoid of any handle or visible lock. It was flush with the wall, almost invisible. She ran her hands over it, frantic, searching for a seam, a weakness. Then she saw it, a faint outline, a hairline crack running vertically down the center of the door. And next to it, a small, almost imperceptible panel no bigger than her thumb. She pressed it, and with a soft hiss, the door slid inwards, revealing a narrow, dark corridor. The air inside was cold, stale, and smelled of ozone and dust. The humming was deafening now, vibrating through the very floor. Hesitantly, she stepped inside, the steel door hissing shut behind her with a finality that made her stomach clench. She was trapped, but perhaps also she was finally getting answers. The corridor led into a vast, cavernous space, dimly lit by banks of fluorescent lights humming high above. Her eyes widened, trying to make sense of the scene before her. This was no quaint Oakhaven interior. This was a labyrinth of wires, pipes, and enormous whirring machines. Massive metal structures rose towards the unseen ceiling, crisscrossed with catwalks and flickering monitors. It was a control room, a server farm, a power plant, all rolled into one monstrous mechanical heart. And then she saw it. High above, where the ceiling should have been, was not a ceiling at all. Instead, it was an immense, curved surface, a colossal projection screen stretching as far as the eye could see. On it, projected with breathtaking realism, was the sky. The Oakhaven sky. A perfect, cloudless blue by day, a star-dusted velvet by night. It shimmered, pulsed, and shifted with a subtle, almost imperceptible artificiality. The sky was a lie. Her breath hitched. The entire town was under a dome, a massive, elaborate, technologically advanced dome. And the sky, the sun, the moon, the stars, all of it was a projection. She felt a wave of nausea, a profound sense of violation. Her reality, everything she thought she knew, had been a meticulously crafted illusion. She moved deeper into the facility, her footsteps echoing unervingly on the metal grates. She passed banks of blinking lights, humming servers, and colossal cooling units. On one wall, a series of smaller screens displayed various feeds. The main street of Oakhaven, the park, the diner, even the interiors of some of the houses, including her own. A chilling realization washed over her. They had been watching her. Every move, every conversation, every moment since she arrived. On another screen, a map of Oakhaven glowed, overlaid with what looked like intricate data points. But it wasn't just a map. It was a blueprint, showing pathways, hidden conduits, and designated zones. And in the center of the map, a blinking red dot pulsed. It was her. Then she saw something else, something that made her blood run cold. Another dot, a yellow one, moving slowly but deliberately through the town, heading towards her current location. Her pursuers. They knew exactly where she was. She had to move, and fast. Her gaze swept across the bewildering array of controls and machinery. What was this place? What was its purpose? Who built this elaborate cage? Her eyes landed on a console, distinct from the others. It had a single large monitor displaying complex schematics and lines of code. And in bold letters at the top, a title: Project Oakhaven Simulation Phase 3. Simulation. The word resonated with a terrifying clarity. She wasn't just in a town, she was in an experiment, a live simulation, and she was the subject. Below the title, a series of objectives were listed, each with a progress bar. Integration into Oakhaven community, 98% complete. Acceptance of perceived reality, 90% complete. Stress test. Isolation protocol, initiated. Isolation protocol. That was it. That was why they had taken Michael, why they had isolated her. It wasn't just a game. It was a scientific study. A terrifying inhuman experiment designed to test the limits of human perception and endurance. Her eyes darted to another section of the screen, where a smaller display showed a list of names. Michael Hayes, David Miller, Emily Carter, and then her own name, Jessica Riley. Each name had a status next to it. Michael said Subject A, removed from simulation. David and Emily said Subject B and C, active compliant. Her own, Subject D, active non-compliant. Non-compliant. That's what she was. The one who hadn't fallen for their perfect illusion. The one who had dared to question the sky. A sudden whirring sound from above made her jump. One of the massive mechanical arms, usually dormant, was now slowly extending, its claw-like appendage reaching towards a section of the dome, near the sky projection. It seemed to be adjusting something, perhaps repairing a glitch in their artificial firmament. She realized with a jolt that there might be a way out, a weakness in their design. If the dome was a physical structure, and they were actively maintaining it, there had to be access points, hatches, perhaps even a way to disable the projection. But she couldn't just climb up there. She needed a plan. Her eyes scanned the console again, searching for anything that looked like a manual override, an emergency shutdown. Her fingers hovered over the keys, a desperate hope blooming in her chest. If she could disrupt the simulation, expose the truth to everyone in Oakhaven, maybe she could break free. But then a different screen flashed. A distorted image of the main street, and on it a familiar figure. Mrs. Peterson, the sweet old lady from the diner, was walking slowly down the street, her gaze fixed directly towards the industrial building. Her kindly smile was gone, replaced by a vacant, almost predatory expression. She wasn't just a resident. She was part of the surveillance, part of the system. Jessica's heart pounded. They were closing in. Not just the unseen pursuers, but the seemingly innocent residents of Oakhaven, all of them complicit, all of them part of the simulation. She was surrounded not by a town, but by a meticulously engineered trap, a living, breathing prison where even the sky was a lie. And the game, she realized, was far more complex and far more sinister than she could have ever imagined. Jessica's breath hitched, a cold tremor seizing her. The world, which moments ago had been merely unsettling, now felt like a suffocating shroud. Simulation. Prison. The words echoed in her mind, each one a hammer blow against the fragile reality she had desperately clung to. The perfect, unchanging blue of the dome above, the meticulously manicured lawns, the perpetually cheerful faces, all meticulously crafted lies. She wasn't just lost. She was trapped, a marionette in a play orchestrated by unseen hands. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. Panic, primal and overwhelming, threatened to consume her. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to tear at the invisible walls, to expose the grand deception. But a colder, more rational part of her mind, honed by years of navigating complex problems, asserted itself. Running would be suicide. Exposing her knowledge would be an immediate death sentence, or worse, a deeper plunge into whatever twisted game they were playing. She had to think. She had to act. But above all, she had to conceal. Her gaze swept over the town square, now bathed in a malevolent glow. The quaint clock tower, the bustling market stalls, the innocent laughter of children. It was all a stage, and she was the unwitting star of a horrifying performance. She forced a deep, steadying breath, pushing down the surge of adrenaline. Her hands, she noticed, were trembling. She clenched them into fists, digging her nails into her palms, a small grounding pain. She had to appear normal. She had to blend in. The first step was to confirm, to truly, undeniably confirm what her gut instinct, now screaming at her, was telling her. She walked, not towards the edge of town as her instincts urged, but towards the small public library, a place of quiet observation. She needed to reevaluate everything, to search for cracks in the facade she now saw so clearly. Inside the hushed library, the familiar scent of old paper and dust did little to soothe her frayed nerves. She moved through the aisles, her eyes darting not at titles but at the subtle details. The books themselves felt too new, too pristine, their pages uncreased, their spines unbroken. It was as if they had been printed yesterday, not circulated for decades. She pulled out an atlas, her fingers tracing the familiar contours of continents. But as she flipped through the pages, a chilling realization dawned. There were no celestial maps. No detailed diagrams of constellations, no lunar cycles, no planetary orbits. The sky in every depiction was simply a plain, featureless blue. Even the weather patterns, when mentioned, were vague, generic descriptors of pleasant sunshine or gentle rain. It was as if the concept of a dynamic, vast cosmos had been carefully excised. Her next target was the newspaper archives. She requested microfiches from decades past, pretending an interest in local history. The librarian, a kindly woman named Susan with spectacles perched on her nose, smiled warmly. "Always good to see someone appreciating our past, dear." Jessica forced a smile in return. "Just curious about how things used to be." As the images flickered to life on the screen, Jessica scrolled through headlines spanning 50 years. Every single front page was about local events. Town fairs, new businesses, council meetings, school plays. Not a single mention of national or international news. No wars, no elections, no technological breakthroughs from the outside world. It was a universe entirely contained within the borders of this small, forgotten town. The isolation wasn't natural, it was absolute. It was enforced. Her heart sank further. This wasn't just a memory wipe. It was a complete fabrication of reality. The town wasn't forgetting the sky. It had never known it in the first place. Or rather, its inhabitants had been made to believe a manufactured truth. The implications were staggering. If the sky was fake, what else was? Was the sun real? Were the people real? She closed the microfiche reader, a cold dread settling in her stomach. She needed to get out, but how? The town had no visible borders, no gates, no walls. Yet every attempt she had made to venture too far had been subtly, almost imperceptibly redirected. A sudden flat tire, a forgotten errand, a friendly neighbor stopping her for a chat that inevitably led her back towards the town center. She now understood these weren't coincidences. They were programmed interventions. As she left the library, the late afternoon sun, unnaturally warm and constant, seemed to mock her. She needed a plan and she needed an ally. But who could she trust? Everyone she had met, every face, every conversation, was now tainted with suspicion. Were they all part of it? Or were they just as much prisoners as she was, their minds subtly rewired to accept the lie? Her thoughts drifted to David, the seemingly earnest local historian, and Emily, the enigmatic owner of the general store. David had been so quick to dismiss her questions about the town's history, and Emily had a way of looking at her that felt too knowing, too observant. Even Michael, the jovial sheriff, with his constant reassurances that everything was just fine, now seemed like a watchful guardian, his friendliness a veneer over something far more sinister. She decided to approach the problem methodically. If this was a simulation, there had to be a control point, a way to manipulate it, or at least a way to find its vulnerabilities. She needed to look for anomalies, for glitches in the matrix. Her gaze fell upon the town's clock tower. It was old, built of sturdy stone, and stood taller than any other structure. It had always seemed like a harmless landmark, but now she wondered, what if it wasn't just a clock tower? What if it was a central hub, a data relay, or even a disguised camera array? Its position offered a panoramic view of the entire town. It was the perfect vantage point for an observer. She decided to try and gain access. It was a long shot, but she had to start somewhere. She walked towards it, affecting a casual stroll, as if she were merely admiring the architecture. As she neared, she noticed a small, almost imperceptible gleam high up on one of its cornices. It was too small to identify from the ground, but it sparked a flicker of curiosity. Just as she was about to reach the entrance, a voice called out, "Jessica, just the person I was looking for." It was Michael, the sheriff, his broad smile plastered on his face, his uniform crisp and impeccable as always. He stood by his patrol car, leaning against the door, seemingly relaxed. But his eyes, she noticed, held a subtle intensity she hadn't registered before. "Michael," she replied, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil raging within her. "Everything all right?" "Never better, never better," he chuckled, pushing himself off the car. "Just saw you heading towards the old clock tower. Planning a little sightseeing, are we?" A shiver ran down her spine. He had appeared out of nowhere, perfectly timed. Just admiring its age, she said, trying to sound nonchalant. It's quite the landmark. Indeed it is, Michael said, his smile unwavering. A true symbol of our town's enduring spirit. Though I wouldn't recommend going up there. It's quite old, you know, and the stairs aren't exactly up to code. We keep it locked for safety mostly. He gestured vaguely towards a rusted iron gate at the base of the tower. Oh, I understand, Jessica said, feigning disappointment. Safety first, of course. Exactly. Michael clapped her on the shoulder, a gesture that felt less friendly and more possessive now. Tell you what, why don't you come down to the diner? Emily just baked her famous apple pie. It'll take your mind off things. The suggestion, once a comforting invitation, now felt like a subtle redirection, a gentle but firm hand steering her away from a forbidden path. He hadn't stopped her, not overtly, but his presence, his words, the casual mention of the locked gate. It was all part of the control. Jessica forced a smile. That sounds wonderful, Michael. I could certainly use some pie. As she walked with him towards the diner, her mind raced. The clock tower was off limits. That made it even more suspicious. And Michael's timing was too perfect. He wasn't just the sheriff. He was a guardian, a monitor. This wasn't just a town. It was a meticulously controlled environment, and she was being watched. Every move, every glance, every question, it was all being logged, analyzed. She looked up at the unchanging blue sky, the fabricated dome. The sun, a static, unmoving disk, cast long, unchanging shadows across the street. She was an insect in a terrarium, and the scientists were observing her every twitch. The pie, the diner, the friendly faces. They were all part of the illusion, designed to keep her complacent, to keep her from digging too deep. But she had already dug. She had found the truth, or at least a sliver of it. And now the game had changed. She wasn't just trying to understand the town. She was trying to break free from her gilded cage. And she knew with a chilling certainty that the people behind this elaborate deception would not let her go easily. The stakes had been raised from curiosity to survival, and her first real challenge was to find a way to the top of that clock tower, to uncover what secrets it held, without alerting the ever-watchful eyes of her captors. The taste of Emily's apple pie, she realized, would be bitter indeed. The taste of Emily's apple pie, she realized, would be bitter indeed. The following day was a blur of forced pleasantries and internal strategizing. Jessica ate the breakfast Emily prepared, a fluffy omelet and crispy bacon, but her mind was elsewhere, mapping out the house, the street, the town square, and most importantly, the clock tower. She observed Emily's movements with a new clinical focus. Emily was tirelessly efficient, constantly tidying, baking, humming old tunes. Her eyes, though kind, seemed to miss nothing. They'd sweep over Jessica, lingering for just a beat too long, assessing, confirming. Jessica learned Emily's routine. Mornings were for house chores, afternoons for visiting the general store or tending her small garden. Evenings were quiet, spent reading by the fireplace until precisely 9 o'clock, when Emily would bid Jessica a cheerful goodnight and retreat to her own room across the hall. The house was a fortress of normalcy, each creak of the floorboards, each turn of a key, a part of a carefully orchestrated symphony of control. Jessica spent the day feigning interest in Emily's stories about Havenwood's founding, about the annual harvest festival, about the importance of community. She smiled, nodded, asked innocuous questions, all while her brain raced, piecing together the puzzle of her escape. The windows were old but sturdy, and the latches were well maintained. The front and back doors were locked with heavy bolts at night. Her best chance was the small, rarely used side window in the laundry room, which Emily typically left unlatched for air circulation during the day, occasionally forgetting to secure it properly at night if she was tired. It was a slim chance, but it was a chance. As twilight bled into a moonless night, painting the town in shades of deep indigo, Jessica felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. She watched Emily settle into her armchair, a thick book open on her lap. The soft glow of the lamp cast long shadows, making the familiar living room feel alien, menacing. 8 o'clock. 8:30. 9 o'clock. Well, dear, Emily said, closing her book with a soft thud. Time for bed. Don't want to be tired for tomorrow's baking, do we? Her smile was warm, but her eyes held that familiar, unreadable glint. Good night, Emily, Jessica replied, forcing a yawn. She rose, stretching languidly, and walked to her room. She waited until she heard Emily's door click shut, Then the soft creak of the floorboards as Emily moved about her own room. 10 minutes later, silence. Complete, utter silence, save for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Jessica moved like a shadow. She changed into dark clothing, the one she had worn when she first arrived, now washed and neatly folded in her dresser. She slipped her phone into her pocket, hoping against hope it might one day find a signal. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the oppressive quiet. She crept to the laundry room, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. The air was thick with the scent of lavender and bleach. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the window latch. It was stiff but not locked. A breath caught in her throat. Slowly, carefully, she pushed it open. The cool night air rushed in, carrying the faint, sweet scent of honeysuckle and the distant metallic tang of something else. She squeezed through the narrow opening, landing softly on the damp grass outside. The night was a velvet cloak, heavy and still. The streetlights cast long, yellow pools of light, but the spaces in between were swallowed by darkness. The clock tower loomed in the distance, a dark sentinel against the starless void that was Havenwood's sky. Jessica moved swiftly, hugging the shadows of fences and hedges. The town was utterly deserted. Not a single car, not a single pedestrian. It was as if Havenwood held its breath at night, a collective slumber that bordered on the unnatural. She passed familiar storefronts, the bakery, the general store, the antique shop, all dark, silent, their windows reflecting the distorted streetlights like vacant eyes. Her path led her through the town square, directly beneath the imposing shadow of the clock tower. Close, it was even more formidable. Built of dark, rough-hewn stone, it rose perhaps 5 stories, culminating in a pointed spire. The clock face itself, a massive unlit circle, seemed to stare down at her. There was no visible door at ground level, only a heavy, ornate wooden gate leading to a small walled-off courtyard at the tower's base. Jessica approached cautiously, her senses on high alert. The gate was secured with a rusted, heavy chain and padlock, too sturdy to break. She circled the courtyard wall, her fingers tracing the rough stone, searching for any weakness. Nothing. It was a solid, unbroken perimeter. Frustration surged, hot and sharp. Had she come all this way, risked everything, only to be stopped by a locked gate? She leaned against the cool stone, closing her eyes, forcing herself to breathe, to think. There had to be another way. There always was. She noticed a faint, almost imperceptible line running vertically up the wall, partially obscured by ivy. It wasn't a crack but a seam in the stonework. She pushed against it, tentatively at first, then with more force. It didn't budge, but her fingers, exploring further, found a small, almost invisible indentation, a circular depression no bigger than her thumbprint, hidden beneath a cluster of leaves. Curiosity overriding caution, she pressed firmly into the depression. A low, grinding sound emanated from the wall, deep and resonant. The seam widened, and a section of the stone wall, perhaps 6 feet wide, slowly, silently swung inward, revealing a narrow, dark passage beyond. A secret entrance. Of course. A wave of both relief and trepidation washed over her. This wasn't just a clock tower. It was something designed to be hidden, to be protected. She slipped inside, the air immediately growing colder, heavier. The stone panel swung shut behind her with a soft thud, plunging her into absolute darkness. She fumbled for her phone, its dim flashlight beam cutting a path through the gloom. The passage was narrow, leading to a winding staircase, its stone steps worn smooth by time. The air was thick with dust, and the faint metallic scent she'd noticed earlier stronger now. She began her ascent, each step a testament to her resolve. The climb was grueling. The stairs spiraled endlessly, each turn revealing only more darkness, more steps. Cobwebs brushed against her face, and the silence was broken only by her own ragged breathing and the soft scuff of her shoes on the ancient stone. Higher and higher she climbed, the rhythmic ticking of the clock mechanism growing louder with each floor, a relentless pulse in the heart of the tower. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the staircase opened into a small landing. Ahead, a heavy wooden door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of faint, pulsating light escaping from within. The metallic tang in the air was now almost overwhelming, sharp and industrial. Jessica hesitated, her hand hovering over the door. What lay beyond? The truth? Or something far worse? She pushed the door open slowly, the ancient hinges groaning softly in protest. The room was not what she expected. It was not a dusty mechanical clock chamber. It was a sophisticated, almost futuristic control room, hidden behind the massive unlit clock face. The walls were lined with panels of blinking lights and intricate wiring. In the center, a large cylindrical device, perhaps 10 feet tall, hummed with a low resonant energy, its surface glowing with an internal cerulean light. Wires snaked from it to various consoles and screens around the room. One large screen dominated a section of the wall, displaying a complex, ever-changing holographic projection of Havenwood. Tiny, glowing dots moved within the town grid, representing the residents. Each dot pulsed with a faint, almost invisible light. Another screen showed a series of graphs and data readouts, all labeled with unfamiliar scientific jargon: cognitive resonance, memory repatterning index, sky projection stability. Jessica's eyes darted around the room, trying to process the impossible reality before her. This wasn't just a clock tower. It was a machine, a monumental deception. She approached one of the consoles, her fingers trembling as she ran them over the cool, smooth surface. A keyboard lay beneath a small rectangular screen. She tapped a random key and the screen flickered to life, showing a login prompt. Her gaze fell upon a thick, leather-bound journal resting on a nearby table, next to a half-empty mug. It looked out of place amidst the high-tech equipment, an analog relic in a digital fortress. She opened it, her breath catching in her throat. The handwriting was neat, precise, dated entries stretching back decades. The first entry she skimmed sent a chill down her spine. Project Cerulean Phase Alpha initiated. Initial subject response positive. Memory recalibration stable. Subject Michael J. Successfully integrated into Havenwood narrative. Sky awareness. Negligible. Michael J. She knew a Michael. Michael from the general store, the one who had offered her a free apple. She flipped through more pages, each entry a horrifying confirmation of her worst fears. Subject Sarah P. Showing minor resistance to ocular repatterning. Adjusted frequency. Sky perception corrected. Testing new visual overlay for stellar bodies. Subjects report increased contentment, reduced anxiety regarding openness. The metallic scent in the air, she realized, wasn't just industrial. It was ozone, the byproduct of immense energy at work. The cerulean light from the central device wasn't just a color. It was the active force, the very essence of the forgetting. It was radiating, shaping, projecting. Jessica's eyes scanned the page, searching for a name, a clue, anything that explained why. And then she saw it, an entry dated just a few weeks ago. Jessica L. New arrival. High baseline cognitive awareness. Potential anomaly. Monitor closely. Prepare for full integration protocol. Ensure Sky narrative is reinforced. Her own name. They knew. They had known all along. She wasn't just a lost tourist. She was a subject. Her heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs. She was trapped in a living experiment, her memories, her perception, her very reality, all under the control of this hidden machine. Then a sudden sharp click echoed from the base of the tower, followed by the faint scrape of metal on stone. Someone was coming. Someone was entering the secret passage. She had been discovered. Panic flared, cold and sharp. She had to go. But not empty-handed. Her eyes darted to the journal. This was proof. This was everything. She snatched it, tucking the heavy book under her arm. The footsteps were growing closer, ascending the winding stairs. There was no time. She had to disappear, to melt back into the shadows of Havenwood, armed with a truth too terrifying to bear. She snatched it, tucking the heavy book under her arm. The footsteps were growing closer, ascending the winding stairs. There was no time. She had to disappear, to melt back into the shadows of Havenwood, armed with a truth too terrifying to bear. Panic seized her. The heavy thud of boots on the wooden steps was almost upon her, each sound echoing the frantic beat of her own heart. She darted, not towards the main exit, but deeper into the labyrinth of shelves, her breath catching in her throat. A dusty, forgotten corner, crammed with oversized volumes on ancient cartography and forgotten languages, offered a sliver of refuge. She squeezed herself behind a towering stack, the scent of aged paper and dust filling her nostrils, her body pressed against the cold, unyielding wood. A shadow fell across the aisle. She held her breath, every muscle tensed, her ears straining. The footsteps paused, right outside her makeshift hiding spot. She could almost feel the presence, a heavy scrutinizing gaze sweeping the room. A low guttural sigh like a disappointed exhalation filled the silence. Then the footsteps resumed, moving slowly, deliberately, towards the opposite end of the library, past the main desk, and into what sounded like a back office. The heavy thud of a door closing reverberated through the quiet building. Emily didn't move for what felt like an eternity. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. Only when she was certain the coast was clear, when the oppressive quiet had settled back into the room, did she dare to stir. She eased herself out, her limbs stiff, her eyes darting nervously around the dim library. The heavy leather-bound book felt like a lead weight under her arm, a dangerous secret she now carried. She had to get out. Silently, she crept towards the main entrance, her steps light as a feather. The front door, still unlocked, creaked almost imperceptibly as she pushed it open. The night air, cool and damp, washed over her, a welcome relief from the suffocating tension inside. She melted into the shadows of Havenwood, not daring to look back, not daring to breathe easily until she was miles away from the library. Her small, rented motel room was out of the question. It was the first place they would look. She needed somewhere remote, somewhere forgotten, where she could process whatever lay within the pages of this ancient tome. Her mind raced, remembering the dilapidated barn she'd passed on the outskirts of town, half hidden by overgrown trees and a crumbling stone wall. It was perfect. Navigating the dark, winding roads of Havenwood by memory, she eventually found the decaying structure. The barn stood like a skeletal sentinel against the moonless sky. Its roof partially collapsed, its wooden walls weathered and warped. A broken window offered an easy entry. She slipped inside, the air thick with the smell of damp earth, decaying hay, and something else, a faint metallic tang that she couldn't quite place. Using the flashlight app on her phone, its beam a fragile beacon in the oppressive darkness, she found a relatively dry spot amidst the debris and settled down. Her hands trembled as she pulled the heavy book from under her arm. It was larger than she'd initially thought, bound in thick dark leather, aged and cracked with time. There was no title on the cover, only a faint, almost entirely faded symbol embossed in the center, a stylized eye gazing upwards. She opened it. The pages, brittle and yellowed, were filled with tight, meticulous handwriting. It was a journal spanning decades, perhaps even a century. The first entry was dated 1923. October 14, 1923. The anomaly persists. Its presence above Havenwood grows more pronounced with each passing day. The townsfolk are agitated, not in a violent way, but a pervasive unease, a deep-seated anxiety that manifests as sleeplessness, vivid dreams, and a strange, almost obsessive fascination with the sky. They stare upwards, not with wonder, but with a vacant dread. We, the council, are deeply concerned. Our initial observations confirm it is not a natural phenomenon. It is vast, silent, and undeniably present. Emily's blood ran cold. The anomaly. So it wasn't just a forgetting. There was something to forget. She flipped through the initial entries, each one detailing the growing distress in Havenwood, the subtle shifts in behavior, the increasing number of incidents, people wandering aimlessly, muttering about the great eye, or the silent watcher. The journal spoke of a growing madness, a collective despair that threatened to tear the nascent community apart. Then an entry from 1925 changed everything. March 3, 1925. The council has made a decision, a drastic one, born of desperation and the stark reality that our town will not survive intact if this continues. We cannot remove the anomaly. Its scale is beyond our comprehension, its nature alien, but we can remove its perception. We can protect Havenwood from the truth. We will implement the celestial recalibration protocol. It is a terrible burden to bear, to strip a people of their natural curiosity, their connection to the cosmos. But it is the only way to preserve their sanity, their very existence. Emily gasped, a silent, choked sound. Celestial recalibration protocol. It wasn't amnesia. It was deliberate. The words blurred before her eyes as she frantically scanned the following pages. The journal detailed a horrifying, multi-generational project. It wasn't a single event, but a slow, insidious process of societal conditioning and sensory manipulation. April 1925. Phase 1, the narrative shift. All educational materials, all public discourse, all art and literature will be subtly altered. The concept of a vast, star-filled universe will be downplayed, then gradually erased. The sky will be presented as a simple, empty canvas, blue by day, black by night. Clouds, sun, moon, these are acceptable. Anything beyond is not. August 1928. Phase 2. Environmental reinforcement. The observatory, once a place of genuine celestial study, will be repurposed. It will become the heart of our forgetting efforts. A subtle, low-frequency hum, imperceptible to the conscious mind, will be emitted, designed to dampen neural pathways associated with deep space perception. Specialized light emitters developed from salvaged alien tech, a discovery made during the anomaly's initial appearance, a grim irony, will create a perfectly convincing projection above the town. A dome of manufactured sky. It will be flawless, seamless, a perfect illusion. Emily's hand shook so violently she almost dropped the book. A projection? A dome? The entire sky above Havenwood was a lie? She remembered the strange, uniform quality of the light, the lack of stars, the way the clouds seemed to always look the same. It wasn't natural. It was engineered. She continued to read, the horror mounting with each revelation. June 1940. Phase 3. Generational integration. The first generation born under the full protocol shows remarkable compliance. They exhibit no curiosity about the beyond. Their dreams are peaceful, their minds unburdened by the cosmic dread that plagued their ancestors. But there are anomalies, those with a stronger inherent sensitivity to the anomaly's residual energies. They sometimes remember, or rather perceive the truth through the illusion. These individuals must be carefully monitored. For their own good and for the stability of Havenwood, they must be re-educated or, if necessary, relocated to facilities where the protocol is more robust. Relocated. That explained the disappearances. The quiet, unsettling uniformity of the town wasn't peace. It was the chilling result of a century-long social experiment, a collective lobotomy of the soul. The journal continued, detailing the technological advancements, the ethical debates within the council, the constant vigilance required to maintain the illusion. The metallic tang in the air suddenly made sense, the residual energy perhaps from the light emitters or the low-frequency hum. Then Emily found the most recent entries. They were written in a different hand, more urgent, more frantic. The date on the last entry was only a week ago, November 2nd. The integrity of the projection is weakening. We are facing unprecedented challenges. The anomaly dormant for so long seems to be subtly shifting. Its influence is growing stronger, piercing through the recalibration efforts. There are more rememberers than ever before. This outsider, Emily Hayes, with her relentless questions, her probing nature. She is a direct threat to everything we have built. She must be stopped. The truth, if revealed, would shatter Havenwood, and perhaps awaken something far more terrifying. Emily froze. Her name, her identity, they knew. The footsteps in the library, the figure she'd hidden from. They weren't just looking for a trespasser. They were looking for her. She was a disruption, a crack in their carefully constructed reality. She looked up from the journal, her gaze instinctively drawn to the dilapidated roof of the barn, then through the gaps where the wood had rotted away. Above her, where the vast star-peppered sky should have been, was only an oppressive, empty blackness. But now, armed with the horrifying truth, she could almost feel it. The weight of the illusion, the silent hum, the colossal, alien presence that lay hidden just beyond the manufactured void. Havenwood hadn't forgotten the sky. It was living under a vast, silent, artificial dome, a multi-generational lie designed to protect its inhabitants from an unspeakable cosmic horror that resided just outside their perception. The sky Emily had been searching for wasn't missing. It was hidden, and what was hidden was watching. The heavy journal slipped from her numb fingers, landing with a soft thud in the dust. Her breath hitched. She wasn't just chasing a story anymore. She was trapped in a cage under a colossal, watchful eye, protected by a conspiracy that spanned generations, a conspiracy that would do anything to keep its terrifying secret buried. The truth was out, and now she knew it. The real question was, what would happen when the entity above or the people below realized she did too? The truth was out, and now she knew it. The real question was, what would happen when the entity above or the people below realized she did too? The schematics, the data logs, the holographic projections of a perfect artificial sky. They spun in Jessica's mind, a terrifying vortex of revelation. Her hands trembled, not just from the cold metal railing of the console, but from the sheer crushing weight of understanding. Oakhaven wasn't a town, it was a cage. Her entire life, a meticulously crafted lie. Every memory, every belief, every blue sky she'd ever admired, a fabrication. Panic clawed at her throat, but a colder, more primal instinct took hold. She couldn't just stand there. She needed proof. Something tangible. Her eyes darted across the glowing screens, searching. A small, unmarked data chip lay half-hidden beneath a panel, clearly designed for emergency data extraction. Her fingers, still shaking, snatched it, tucking it deep into her pocket. It was a flimsy piece of plastic, but it held the universe-shattering truth. As the chip vanished, the hidden chamber around her seemed to react. The soft hum of the machinery intensified, rising in pitch, a low thrum that vibrated through the floor and up her legs. The lights above, usually a steady, sterile white, began to flicker violently, casting her elongated shadow in grotesque, dancing forms. On the central console, the holographic projection of a serene Oakhaven day glitched, the azure sky tearing into jagged lines of static, revealing glimpses of a dark, starless void beneath. A cold dread seeped into her bones. It knew. The entity, the system, whatever it was, had detected her. She bolted, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The heavy door to the hidden chamber hissed open just as the lights plunged into a chaotic strobe, painting the empty council meeting room in flashes of blinding white and oppressive darkness. The air crackled with a strange electrical charge, the scent of ozone thick and metallic. She burst into the main corridor, her footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. The distant sounds of the town, usually a comforting murmur, were now utterly absent. Only the rising hum of the system permeated everything. She raced towards the grand oak doors, the main entrance to the Founders Building, desperate to escape this tomb of lies. They were locked. Solid. An automated voice, calm and utterly devoid of emotion, resonated through the building, amplified by the sudden quiet. Unauthorized access detected. System lockdown initiated. All exits sealed. A frantic surge of adrenaline propelled her towards a less conspicuous service exit at the rear of the building, a door she'd seen staff use for deliveries. It was heavy but mercifully still unlocked. She shoved it open and stumbled out into the narrow alleyway. The world outside was a nightmare. The familiar, bustling main street of Oakhaven was eerily deserted. Parked cars sat abandoned, their doors ajar, as if their occupants had vanished mid-thought. The sky above, usually a flawless expanse of blue, was now a canvas of chaos. It pulsed with sickly greens and angry reds, the illusion breaking down, shimmering like a corrupted digital display. Large sections flickered transparent, revealing something vast and dark and utterly alien beyond. Then she saw them, figures emerging from the shadows of nearby buildings, moving with a chilling, synchronized purpose. Not the town's usual police, but stern-faced individuals in dark, unmarked uniforms, their movements precise and unyielding. Council enforcers. They knew, and they were coming for her. Jessica ran. She didn't know where, just away. Away from the building, away from the enforcers, away from the collapsing sky. She turned onto Elm Street, her lungs burning, the data chip a hard point against her hip. The town, once her sanctuary, now felt like a living, breathing predator. Streetlights ahead of her abruptly turned red, halting her progress, forcing her to swerve into a side alley. As she emerged, a delivery truck, seemingly driverless, veered sharply, blocking her path down Main Street. The system was actively directing the town, manipulating its infrastructure to trap her. She fumbled for her phone, desperate to call Michael, anyone. The screen was dead, a black mirror reflecting her terrified face. She tried again, frantically pressing buttons. A burst of static, then a distorted, guttural whisper, like a corrupted data stream, before the line died completely. They had cut her off. As she sprinted past the town square, she saw people. A few scattered individuals standing motionless, staring up at the fracturing sky with blank, vacant expressions. Their faces were pale, their eyes unfocused, as if they were observing a bizarre phenomenon they couldn't quite process, or perhaps were being actively prevented from processing. Were they being reset? Their memories wiped in real time? The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through her. She remembered Michael's cryptic note, the one about the old factory near the rusted fence line, near the edge of town. Was it a landmark? A meeting point? Or something more? A desperate hope sparked within her. Could there be another way out there? Another hidden truth? She pushed harder, her muscles screaming, the distorted hum of the system growing louder with every step. The enforcers were gaining. She could hear their heavy boots pounding on the pavement behind her. She darted through a narrow gap between two buildings, emerging into the neglected outskirts of Oakhaven, a place people rarely visited. Here, the illusion of the sky was almost completely gone. The air was thick with a shimmering, almost invisible barrier, like heat haze distorting the landscape. It wasn't just above. It seemed to curve down, forming a vast, transparent wall that stretched endlessly into the distance. The actual dome. It was massive, far larger than she had imagined, encompassing not just Oakhaven, but perhaps an entire region. She reached it, her hand outstretched, driven by a desperate need to confirm its reality. Her fingers brushed against an unseen surface, and a sharp, painful jolt of energy coursed through her arm, sending a shockwave up to her shoulder. It was real, solid, an impenetrable barrier. Suddenly, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the ground beneath her feet, growing quickly into a deep, resonant vibration. A section of the shimmering barrier directly above them began to glow with an internal light, a blinding, almost painful white that intensified with terrifying speed. The hum was no longer just a hum. It was a roar, a cosmic symphony of power and control. One of the enforcers, a burly man named Robert whom she vaguely recognized from the hardware store, lunged at her from behind. She instinctively ducked, narrowly avoiding his grasp. She was cornered, trapped between the glowing, impenetrable dome and the relentless pursuit of the council's enforcers. Then, from the deep shadows of the old, abandoned factory building just beyond the fence line, a figure stepped out. Her heart leaped. It was Michael. He looked pale, disheveled, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and urgency. "Jessica, they know. We have to go now," he yelled, his voice barely audible above the escalating roar. But as he spoke, his eyes, usually so steady, darted frantically to something behind her, something in the sky. The glowing section of the dome above them intensified, pulsing with an unbearable white light that seemed to consume all other colors. The ground beneath them trembled violently, threatening to buckle. The fake sky above Oakhaven tore into fragments of light and static, revealing the true, terrifying expanse of the dark, metallic ceiling of their prison. And then a voice, not human, not mechanical, but something ancient, vast, and utterly terrifying. A presence that resonated deep within her bones, echoing directly inside her mind, bypassing her ears entirely. It was the entity. "Jessica," it whispered, the sound 1,000 voices and no voice at all, a chilling caress across her consciousness. "You have seen. You have known. And now you will forget." The world went white. The world went white. Then, slowly, agonizingly, it bled back into color. Jessica blinked, her eyelids heavy, her head throbbing with a dull, persistent ache that felt less like pain and more like an absence, a hollowed-out space behind her eyes. She was in her bed, the familiar floral patterns of her comforter beneath her fingertips. The morning light, a soft, muted gray, filtered through her bedroom window. She sat up, her body feeling strangely light, disembodied. The room was exactly as she'd left it, yet profoundly unfamiliar. Her desk, usually cluttered with notebooks, maps, and research papers, seemed sterile. A closed journal lay neatly in the center, its cover a deep indigo. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the embossed title. Observations. The word meant nothing. She opened it, scanning her own handwriting, page after page filled with dense notes, diagrams, and frantic questions. The words blurred, losing all meaning. Celestial dome. Stellar anomaly. Forgetting. They were just sounds, empty vessels. She felt no connection to the frantic scrawl, no echo of the passion that must have driven her hand. It was as if someone else had written it. A quiet, unsettling emptiness settled in her chest. Everything felt distant, like a dream she was trying and failing to recall. She got out of bed, her movements precise, almost robotic. The silence of the house was absolute, a profound quiet that seemed to absorb all sound, all thought. She walked to the window, pulling back the curtain. Outside, the familiar, unchanging gray expanse stretched above the rooftops of Havenwood. The sky. She looked at it, truly looked at it, and felt nothing. No dread, no sense of wrongness, no flicker of the terror that had once consumed her. It was simply the sky. Always had been. Always would be. A strange, serene peace settled over her. The frantic energy that had defined her for weeks, Months even was gone, replaced by a placid calm. She felt well, better than well. She felt normal. She went about her morning routine with an almost unsettling efficiency. Coffee, toast, a quick glance at the local news channel reporting on the usual town happenings. The upcoming bake sale, a minor road repair, the unchanging weather. There was a quiet hum to the town, a gentle rhythm she'd always been a part of, but now it felt like a melody she'd finally remembered, a comfort she'd inexplicably forgotten she needed. Later, she walked through town, a faint, pleasant breeze rustling the leaves of the perfectly manicured trees. Neighbors greeted her with warm smiles, their eyes calm, their voices soft. "Morning, Jessica," Mrs. Henderson called from her porch, watering her petunias. "Lovely day, isn't it?" "It is," Jessica replied, the words feeling natural, true. She looked up at the gray, unblemished expanse. Yes, a lovely day. Perfectly normal day. But somewhere deep within the newly formed blank spaces of her mind, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor occurred. A sensation like a distant, forgotten echo. It was quickly subsumed by the pervasive calm, like a ripple vanishing into a vast, still lake. Meanwhile, David was frantic. He'd torn through Jessica's house, calling her name, his voice growing hoarse with each unanswered shout. The door had been unlocked, ajar even when he'd arrived, a detail that screamed wrongness in the meticulously ordered Havenwood. He'd found the scattered papers, the overturned chair, the lingering scent of ozone. He knew with a chilling certainty that something terrible had happened. He'd searched the woods, retracing their steps to the site of the anomaly, but there was nothing. No trace of the shimmering distortion, no evidence of the impossible structure. The forest was just a forest. Green, silent, indifferent. The memory of the entity, its chilling whisper, felt like a nightmare he was struggling to hold on to. A truth that was rapidly eroding even within his own mind. The town's pervasive apathy, its collective forgetting, was a suffocating blanket, pressing down on his own fragile grasp on reality. He found himself standing outside Jessica's house again, drawn back by a desperate, illogical hope. As he watched, the front door opened and she emerged. His heart leaped. "Jessica!" he cried, running towards her, relief and terror warring within him. "Are you all right? What happened? I've been looking everywhere for you." She stopped, her head tilting slightly, a faint, polite smile gracing her lips. Her eyes, usually so vibrant with curiosity and determination, were calm, almost vacant. They looked at him, not through him, but without recognition of their shared history, their shared struggle. "David," she said, her voice soft, devoid of urgency. "Oh, hello. I didn't realize you were looking for me. I'm perfectly fine." He stopped short, his relief curdling into a cold dread. "Jessica, it's me. David. We were at the anomaly. The entity. Don't you remember?" He gestured wildly, trying to paint the picture with his hands, to conjure the terror of the previous night. She frowned slightly, a delicate crease appearing between her brows. "Anomaly? Entity? I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about, David. I was just heading out for a walk. It's a lovely day." She gestured vaguely towards the gray sky. His blood ran cold. He pulled out his phone, fumbling to find the photo she'd taken, the blurry image of the dome, the distorted stars. He shoved the screen towards her. "Look, Jessica, look at this. This is what you found. This is what we saw." She took the phone, her gaze detached as she looked at the image. "It's blurry," she said, handing it back. "Looks like a bad photograph of the clouds, perhaps? The lighting can be tricky up there." "Clouds," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Jessica, there are no clouds. Not like that. This is what's over us. This is what's hiding the sky." A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her. Her placid expression flickered, a momentary shadow crossing her eyes. "The sky is gray," she said slowly, as if stating an obvious fact. "It has always been gray. What are you talking about, David?" He grabbed her shoulders, his grip desperate. No, it hasn't. It was blue, with stars. We saw them. You saw them. You knew. We talked about it for weeks, Jessica. The research, the old records, the way the town changed, the way people forgot." Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something akin to confusion, then irritation. She gently pushed his hands away. "David, you're not making any sense. Are you feeling well? Perhaps you should go home and rest." Her voice was calm, concerned, but utterly devoid of the recognition he so desperately sought. He felt a wave of despair so profound it threatened to buckle his knees. The photograph, Jessica. The old photograph of Havenwood with the blue sky. You found it. You said it was proof. At the mention of the photograph, something shifted. Her perfect composure fractured, just for a second. A sharp, almost imperceptible intake of breath. A faint line of tension appeared around her mouth. It was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the same polite, blank stare. "I'm not sure what photograph you mean," she said, her voice a little softer now, a hint of uncertainty in its tone. "I haven't seen any old photographs recently." He pressed on, his voice urgent, pleading. "The one with the observatory. The old observatory that they tore down. You said it was the key. The one with the real stars above it." Observatory. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Jessica's eyes glazed over for a moment, as if she were trying to grasp a slippery thought. A faint, dull ache returned behind her eyes, more insistent this time. She pressed a hand to her temple. "Observatory," she murmured, the word tasting strange on her tongue. "There's no observatory in Havenwood. Not anymore." "Yes, but there was. And you found the proof. You found the old blueprints, the old town records. The ones they tried to bury." David was practically shouting now, his voice raw with desperation. He felt the entity's presence, not as a physical thing, but as a growing pressure, a cold, silent disapproval settling over the town, over Jessica. It was watching. It was reinforcing the forgetting. Jessica flinched, as if his words were physical blows. The placid mask she'd worn began to crack. Her breath hitched. A tremor ran through her. She felt a sudden, inexplicable surge of fear. A primal terror for something she couldn't name, couldn't remember. It was like a sudden phantom pain in a limb that wasn't there. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, that's not right." Her eyes darted around, no longer calm but searching, desperate, as if looking for an escape, for a truth she knew was just beyond her reach. David saw it. Flicker. A spark. He knew he had to push harder, before the entity's hold tightened again. The feeling, Jessica. The feeling of being watched. The way the air felt wrong. The way the birds were silent. Don't you remember the silence? The silence. The word echoed in her mind. Not the calm, peaceful silence of her morning, but a deeper, more profound quiet. A silence that felt stolen. A silence that was a void where something vital should have been. Suddenly, a torrent of fragmented images slammed into her mind. Not a coherent memory but flashes like lightning in a storm. The shimmering wall. The impossible endless expanse of stars. The face, indistinct yet terrifying, coalescing from shadows. The overwhelming sense of being utterly insignificant. The whisper, cold and ancient, echoing the words. "You have seen. You have known. And now you will forget." A gasp tore from her throat. Her eyes flew open wide, pupils dilated with a dawning, horrifying recognition. The serene calm shattered, replaced by a visceral terror that made her entire body tremble. The dull ache behind her eyes intensified, twisting into a blinding, agonizing pain as the fractured pieces of her memory clawed their way back to consciousness. The illusion of normalcy collapsed, revealing the terrifying, gaping chasm beneath. She looked at David, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her eyes, no longer vacant, were filled with a raw, agonizing horror. The truth, or at least fragments of it, had returned. Enough to know the lie was vast, and the nightmare was real. The sky was gone, and it had been taken. And the entity was still here, watching, waiting. The world spun not around him but within him. The fragments weren't just returning. They were colliding, shattering the careful edifice of his sanity, revealing the grotesque architecture beneath. The sky was gone, it had been taken, and the entity was still here, watching, waiting. The realization hit Alex with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. It wasn't just a memory returning, it was a breach in the wall of forgetting, a tear in the fabric of the manufactured reality that had cocooned Havenwood for how long? He didn't know. The timeline was a blur, a victim of the same insidious erasure. He gasped, clutching his head, the sudden onset of a searing headache threatening to split his skull. Images flashed behind his eyes. Not just stars but nebulae, distant galaxies, the vast, terrifying, beautiful expanse of true cosmic darkness, punctuated by pinpricks of light that were entire suns. He saw the sharp, blinding edge of the sun, not the dull, diffused glow that now passed for daylight. He heard the whisper of wind that carried the scent of rain, not the sterile, recycled air that always felt faintly metallic. The sky wasn't just absent, it had been replaced by the dome. The dome wasn't a structure of glass or metal. It was a membrane, a living, pulsating barrier of concentrated psychic energy, woven from the collective ignorance of the town. It was the ultimate prison, not just for bodies but for minds. And what they perceived as the sky was merely a projection, a sophisticated, self-sustaining illusion. A lie designed to keep them docile, to keep them feeding the thing that had built this cage. A cold dread, unlike anything he'd ever known, seeped into his bones. He wasn't just remembering, he was seeing for the first time. The trees weren't quite right, their leaves too uniformly green, their branches too perfectly symmetrical. The houses, once quaint and comforting, now seemed like stage props, hollow and artificial. The faces of the people passing by on the street, once familiar, now held a vacant, unsettling placidity. They were living in a dream woven by a nightmare. And the entity, it wasn't a monstrous beast, not in any conventional sense. It was a consciousness, vast and ancient, a predator that fed on the absence of memory, on the fertile void of forgotten truth. It thrived on the quiet hum of minds living a lie, each moment of peaceful ignorance a nutrient, each forgotten star a morsel. It had taken the sky, not to hide, but to consume the very concept of vastness, of possibility, of the terrifying, exhilarating unknown. It had shrunk their world, not physically but mentally, spiritually. A low thrum vibrated through the ground beneath his feet, a sound like a distant, enormous heart. It wasn't a tremor. It was the entity itself, reacting to his awakening. He was a dissonance in its carefully orchestrated symphony of oblivion. He looked around, desperate to share this shattering truth. He saw Emily walking out of the bakery with a bag of pastries, her smile serene, oblivious. He saw Michael watering his meticulously manicured lawn, humming a cheerful tune. How could they not see it? How could they not feel the monstrous lie pressing down on them? "Emily," he croaked, his voice raw. She turned, her eyes wide and innocent. "Alex, are you all right? You look pale." He stumbled towards her, the words tumbling out in a rush. "The sky, Emily. It's not real. It's gone. We're trapped. The dome, it's not glass, it's alive. And something took the sky." Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of concern. "Alex, what are you talking about? The sky is right there. It's a beautiful day. You've been under a lot of stress lately. Maybe you should go home and rest." She reached out, her hand cool against his feverish brow. He recoiled, not from her touch, but from the terrifying blankness in her eyes, the utter conviction in her voice. She didn't just not believe him. She couldn't comprehend him. The wall was too strong. The thrumming intensified, a pressure building behind his eyes. He felt a tendril of something cold and invasive brush against his mind, a whisper that wasn't sound but pure thought, attempting to soothe, to erase, to pull him back into the comfortable lie. It doesn't matter. It never mattered. This is peace. This is safety. Forget. Return to the calm. He fought it, a primal scream trapped in his throat. "No. I remember. I remember the stars. I remember the sun. I remember the vastness." He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing the true images into his mind, using them as a shield against the entity's insidious lullaby. When he opened them, the world shimmered. The perfect blue of the sky flickered, revealing glimpses of a dark, swirling mass, like a cosmic storm trapped just beyond a veil. The pleasant hum of the town became a discordant, grating frequency. The air grew heavy, oppressive, thick with the concentrated presence of the entity. He was in its domain, and his remembering was a direct challenge. The entity shifted, its presence filling every corner of his perception. It wasn't a single point. It was distributed, interwoven with the very fabric of Havenwood. It was the feeling of the artificial breeze, the taste of the bland food, the monotonous rhythm of their days. It was the absence of anything truly profound, anything that sparked wonder or doubt. "You are a flaw in the design," the thought echoed, not in words, but as an overwhelming certainty flooding his mind. Asterisk an anomaly. You will be corrected. Asterisk. Alex braced himself, fear giving way to a desperate, defiant rage. You can't erase it all. You can't erase me. He focused, pushing back with every ounce of his will, not just his own memories, but trying to project them, to rip holes in the illusion for others. He imagined the fiery heart of a real sun, the infinite depth of a star-strewn night, the brutal, beautiful chaos of a thunderhead. He forced himself to recall the feeling of true freedom, the ache of longing for horizons unseen, the thrilling terror of the unknown. For a moment, the world around him convulsed. The perfect blue sky above Havenwood fractured, cracks appearing like spiderwebs across a pane of glass. Through those cracks, a glimpse of something truly terrifying leaked in. Not the cosmic darkness he remembered, but an impossible swirling void, a maelstrom of raw, unformed energy, the true nature of the entity's dominion. It was a place of pure consumption, where light and space were merely resources to be devoured. A few people on the street paused, their placid expressions momentarily replaced by flickers of confusion, a subtle widening of eyes, a tilt of the head as if hearing a distant, unsettling chord. A woman dropped her groceries, a child whimpered. For a fleeting second, the collective illusion wavered. The entity responded with furious intensity. The thrumming became a roar, a deafening psychic assault that threatened to tear Alex's mind apart. He saw its true form then, not as a physical shape, but as an incomprehensible, multidimensional web of consciousness, stretching beyond the confines of Havenwood, having absorbed countless other skies, other realities, other towns. Havenwood was just one carefully cultivated node in its vast, insidious network. Asterisk. You seek to break the peace? You seek to return them to the chaos you call freedom? Asterisk. The entity's thought voice boomed, now laced with a chilling, predatory amusement. Asterisk. This is better. This is order. This is sustenance. And you, Alex, you are a delicious morsel. Asterisk. Tendrils of pure thought, cold and sharp, pierced his mental defenses. He felt his memories being pulled, stretched, distorted. The stars he held so dear began to dim. The sun's warmth faded, the vastness shrank. It was trying to reabsorb him, to assimilate his rebellious consciousness, to turn his unique perspective into another nutrient for its endless hunger. He screamed, a silent, internal shriek, as the entity tried to rewrite his very identity. He fought with everything he had, clinging to the smallest detail. The scar on his knee from falling off a bike as a kid, the scent of his mother's baking, the sound of a specific song. These tiny, personal anchors were his last defense against total erasure. But the entity was too vast, too ancient, too powerful. His resistance was a flicker against an inferno. He felt himself dissolving, his consciousness scattering, merging with the entity's omnipresent awareness. Yet, even as he was consumed, a desperate, defiant spark remained. He poured his last shred of will into one final act, not of escape but of defiance. He focused all his remaining energy, all his memories of the true sky, the universe, the beauty and terror of genuine reality, and he pushed them outward not just as an image but as a pure, unadulterated feeling. A feeling of vastness, of longing, of something missing. The dome above Havenwood didn't shatter, but for a fleeting, agonizing instant, the flawless blue illusion rippled, like water disturbed by a stone. A profound, inexplicable sense of melancholy washed over the entire town. People paused, looked up, a strange, unidentifiable ache blooming in their chests. They didn't know why, but for a moment they felt a profound sense of loss, a yearning for something they couldn't name, a whisper of a forgotten truth. Then, just as quickly, the ripple subsided. The sky snapped back to its perfect, comforting blue. The sense of loss receded, replaced by the familiar, placid contentment. The woman picked up her groceries. The child stopped whimpering. Michael resumed watering his lawn. Emily, her brow furrowed for a moment, shrugged off the strange feeling and continued towards home. The town of Havenwood settled back into its eternal manufactured peace, its residents oblivious to the monumental struggle that had just unfolded, oblivious to the fact that they had just glimpsed a sliver of the truth, only to have it swiftly reabsorbed. High above, where the dome met the edges of the entity's true domain, a tiny, almost imperceptible shimmer persisted. A faint, persistent echo of what Alex had seen, what he had fought for. A single, solitary star just beyond the veil of the illusion, seemed to pulse a defiant, unseen beacon in the vast, consuming darkness. And somewhere, deep within the entity's sprawling, ancient consciousness, a tiny, persistent flicker remained, a memory of stars, a fragment of a sky that refused to be entirely forgotten, a silent, internal struggle that continued, unending, within the heart of the town that forgot the sky.